Alright, ready?
Welcome to Tinfoil Talks.
Hello, welcome to the Tinfoil Talks. This is episode 3, which is part 2 of our little series on platform capitalism. Today we're going to be focusing on Airbnb, which is a service providing accommodations kind of the same way Uber does. And we're actually in an Airbnb right now in Port Greville, Nova Scotia. So Justin's going to give you a little tour. So as you can see, we're in a nice little top floor apartment.
Nice
with
bedroom.
Yeah, nice
double
bedroom.
bed, including a single bed as well. We're lucky enough to have a extra cot here.
It's very nice. And this was actually, we only paid $89, and it sleeps 4 people, and we got one night, Friday night. And it's so far we've had a great experience. They've provided us with cutlery, coffee, tea, pretty much anything we need. The coffee maker's there, blenders, everything we need. And we actually sat down for an interview with them, which we'll get to later. But Brent and I are going to talk about the kind of ups and downs of Airbnb because, you know, not everything is all good. Some of these things are too good to be true. So we're going to kind of inform you guys on what Airbnb really brings to the table.
So I guess the first thing you want to know is Airbnb was founded in 2008 in San Francisco, California. It's grown a lot now. It's included in about 2 million listings worldwide, which is great. So basically what the idea is that you can use your phone, you can use the internet, and you can kind of book houses. And not just houses. Like if you are looking to live in a castle for a night, that's honestly something you can do. If you just go to the Airbnb website, you can book for a castle. You can book for villas. You don't have to just do one night stays. You can ask for weeks at a time, months are even
Anything,
available.
really.
If you really need somewhere to stay for a long time, that's something that's very much available to you. It's kind of a great way for you to explore because a lot of hotels obviously are really in the middle of cities. But with this kind of option, you can really explore like the outskirts of a city or even just like the outside of a town. Like right now we're in Port Greville, which is far from a city.
Quite frankly, in the middle of nowhere.
We have a great view of the ocean though, and we're at the top of this house. We're just connected to a house through their attic. And we have been able to explore a little bit of Nova Scotia that we honestly had never heard of before.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Went for dinner at a little restaurant in Parsboro, which was very nice. Very nice meal.
Yeah, so I guess one of the best parts about this is that since it's such a low expenditure for travelers, it's kind of forced the hotels to kind of drop their prices as well.
Definitely.
So even if you're not an Airbnb user, you might be reaping the benefits of it because you notice that hotel prices are going down. That actually is becoming the norm now because Airbnb is kind of taken over in terms of bookings. Something I noticed online was in 2014 to 2015, there were actually 2.8 million bookings for overnight stays through Airbnb versus about 500,000 bookings through hotels, which is crazy to think about that it grew so much in just 6 years. It's actually got a net worth now of about $10 billion.
Which is wild.
Yeah, that's a large amount, which is actually more than the Hyatt Hotel, which is a very well-known hotel. Yeah. And so it's kind of taken over in that sense. So I guess we could talk about kind of the way that it goes for the visitors as well as the housekeepers. So basically, it's just any other house. You can, as long as you own it, you can kind of
it's like
join in.
Yeah, I mean, last episode we talked about Uber, and I mean, if you own a car that's up to grade, you can become an Uber driver. Pretty much the same thing if you own a property that is suitable for somebody to stay in, you can become an Airbnb host. So I've actually stayed in multiple Airbnbs. I stayed in 2 in the UK, and both were amazing experiences. One had a dog, and one was this wonderful couple who like made us breakfast, and we got to stay in their master bedroom while they slept in a bed off to the side because they wanted us to have the best experience possible. So it was really, really great, actually. And so far, this is the third Airbnb that I've stayed in. And like, I have not had a single negative experience so far. I'm sure as the years go on and I stay in more and more that I'm bound to have a negative experience. But so far, I mean, I've stayed in 3 places across 2 countries, and I haven't even spent a total of $300.
Yeah.
So that's pretty nice.
So I guess kind of the best perks about that is that you get that very personable feeling because you are only staying with one family instead of going to a hotel where you book a room to yourself. But like with this, we actually met the owners of the house. They were really nice to us. They told us a little bit about where we are, and they kind of guided us through our travels. I guess to look at some of the downsides to Airbnb, though, you kind of do have to put a lot of trust in the people that you're staying with, because you don't know. Besides like reviews online, of course, like each owner is reviewed by or can be reviewed by anyone who stays there,
as well as the visitors. Yeah,
exactly. So each person, like if you have an account online, you can be reviewed by whoever's house you stayed in, that they might say this is a great person, this is a terrible person, and that way you can affect yourself in later attempts to go into an Airbnb like that.
It's very reputation based.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing for sure. But with staying in a hotel, you kind of have that standard. You know exactly what you're going to be able to expect. Like you have the door that locks behind you, so you know that you aren't really in any danger, essentially, like in any danger like that. But like with this kind of thing, you do have to put a lot of trust in other people. They aren't always the easiest places to find, obviously, because it's just some house on a street, right? You don't have the large signage like a hotel would have, or all of the maps.
This is quite off the beaten path.
Yeah,
this where we are right now.
Yeah, it was a little difficult, but we obviously just used our phones and then the GPS that we have there. I guess some of the more important things to think about as well is how this has changed the hotel industry. Like we talked about earlier, how the Airbnb is becoming almost more valuable than some hotels now. And that's kind of led to some issues for hotel workers. So we've found that about 2,800 workers have been laid off due to hotels not being able to keep their staff, because obviously Airbnb doesn't have staff besides maintenance to the online. The real staff are just the hosts that you're living with. Exactly. So where a hotel would have to pay to gain more infrastructure, like adding more rooms or more levels to their hotel or adding a pool, etc., Airbnb doesn't have to do something like that. They
are having people literally like add their rooms to this like virtual hotel.
I mean, if I wanted to sign up right now, that's an extra place that Airbnb has covered without them paying to have me join them. Obviously,
awesome.
There is a service charge, of course, to join as a host. Of course, you have to pay them a little bit.
Yeah, they take percentages.
Yeah, but at the same time, you do make quite, like, you can set your own kind of limits. And
after the interview, we actually found that they made, it was around $8,000 a year.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. The people here in this like tiny little Port Greville town were talking about like how many visitors they had. And
actually, why don't we just cut to that interview right now, and we'll go from there afterwards.
Would you guys mind introducing yourselves?
I'm Colleen.
I'm Dave.
Yeah, and we're in Port Greville.
We live
Nova
here.
Scotia. Yeah.
All right. How long have you guys been Airbnb hosts?
3 years, I guess. The first year, we just had a few people sort of at the end of the first year, And then it's been 2 solid years, I'd say. Two
Very cool.
good summers, yeah.
So what made you guys decide to host?
Well, we'd been doing informal hosting in other ways, and we'd been renting my brother's cottage through Kijiji. And then our friend Paul actually told us about Airbnb. He'd used it overseas and stuff, so we looked into it, and it seemed really interesting and kind of a perfect fit for what we're doing out here to some degree. Yeah.
What do you mean by informal hosting? Just like people you know, just bring
People
them in?
we know, bands,
Yeah.
we do recording and stuff like that.
Cool.
And so I guess what I mean to say is we were using this space in a similar way, like we had people staying sort of in this apartment area when we were doing those things. So
Very cool.
yeah.
So, roughly how many visitors would you guys say you get annually?
Well, I would say between 130 to 200 or so,
Wow.
possibly.
So
Yeah, I just remember. Well, and I'm saying that because I don't have an exact count, but I know sometimes like part of what the Airbnb feed shows you is within the, they have a range of maybe a couple months. So within that, you've had 100 visits or whatever, and I see that pretty regularly. So it kind of rolls over, but I would say, yeah.
Yeah, it would add up fast. I mean, there's 4 of you, and you're here for one night, so like.
Yeah, though
If there's
I mean,
another
I'm
couple next
counting of
night.
you guys as one
Oh, I see.
visitors,
Okay.
of course. But yeah, I would say like in terms of visitors or visits, separate
Visits,
visits, yeah, we would have had
That's
between
crazy.
130 to 200 or over. So yeah.
Alright, very cool. So with all those visitors, I mean, before when you were walking us through, you mentioned like liability and like the ladder and salting the walkways. So how has that affected your experience with Airbnb? I mean, it's something that you definitely want to be on top of.
Yeah,
Everybody's been pretty cool, and like we haven't had a lot of complaints about weird stuff like that.
I would say that because it's such an autonomous kind of thing, that I feel a heightened sense of responsibility in that way, to make sure that as much as we can have knowledge of, we're trying to do things in a safe way. So to be aware of things like salting the walkways and things like the heaters and keeping curtains back from them when we can and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Are you guys familiar with like what the liability process like is with Airbnb or?
Not terrifically familiar. I know they do have insurance, like a liability insurance.
Similar, like I'm not familiar with it either.
Yeah.
It's similar to Uber, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think so. I think what they have is like a $1 million liability. Part of that is if your house gets trashed, sort of thing, and part of that I would imagine is also for unexpected accidents or occurrences for the visitors or the people renting or whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys heard about was it Calgary or Vancouver?
I think it was Calgary.
It was Calgary where that person had, 4 hours after the hosts left, this guest had a wild party.
Yeah.
And there was like barbecue sauce on the ceiling. Like, it was like ruined. The house was completely ruined.
We've heard a couple of those. I think they, those have happened, and I think they often people have heard of them or perpetuate that, similar story or same story or whatever. So we've heard a few. We've been really fortunate here, but yeah, that there is risk involved.
Yeah. When you hear something like that, does it worry you?
Not particularly, given my experiences, and
yeah, like all the guests have been pretty good.
Yeah, we've
Everybody's
had
been
really great experiences
respectful
in that sense. It's worrisome because it could potentially happen, but we're pretty. It seems like sometimes those situations, the host is completely removed from the house or whatever, so we're in pretty close proximity to the places we're renting, or we're right here. So I think there's less incentive. And we're also in a rural area, so it's not relevant in the same way as if we were in Toronto. No one's going to come out here and hey everyone, come and party. Doesn't make much sense.
Locals.
Have you guys ever stayed at Airbnb as a guest?
No.
Oh, I guess not.
I don't think we have.
No.
No.
Just thinking.
Yeah.
That's cool. Okay, kind of multifaceted question. What? How would you describe your average visitor, and why do you think people come here to Port Greville in your apartment?
Well, I would say there are a few places to stay around here for sure, but they're largely more traditional B&Bs. There are a few hotels and motels, but not too many. We are kind of off the beaten track, but yeah, as you guys know. But happily, we also have. There's some interesting tourist attractions, like there's the Joggins Fossil Cliffs, and there's Cape Dore up there, and so there are people coming through in the summer a lot. So that's part of the reason. I think there's just not there aren't a whole lot of places to stay, but there are still people coming through. I think we're also, and through Airbnb, attracting perhaps a younger group of people staying sometimes, or perhaps people who are living or experiencing lifestyles that are not whereby they might necessarily feel totally comfortable in a traditional sort of rural Nova Scotian, pretty white older people Airbnb or B&B, So it's maybe a bit more comfortable. Like I know I wouldn't necessarily go and stay at an Airbnb or at a B&B, just because of I guess comfort and stuff, So I think we're hitting that same demographic.
I mean, it's the first place I look now for traveling. It's great.
Well, and it's also a shift that's happening. So I think there's a transition.
My friend's parents just bought a B&B across the water in the valley or whatever. This is just anecdotal, but he was saying that a lot of the B&Bs around there don't like to have children there. So we're like kid friendly. We'll take anyone with kids or whatever, and so I thought that was interesting to hear. Again, I have no I didn't look it up or anything, but
well, and I think I hope it could be that we're moving towards like a less structured way of being or doing things sometimes. There is a greater kind of laterality and maybe flexibility in Airbnb. You're dealing with people, it's people on people kind of thing, and those structures or institutions are kind of alleviated a bit. Now that doesn't mean that Airbnb is not trying to replicate those sometimes in some ways, and dealing with them is not so enjoyable as the process of just having the structure there. Like they really corral you through. I can't immediately access them. I have to go through a series of questions like, what is your concern regarding or whatever. So for me, and I think Dave too, it's off-putting because it reduces the autonomy that is exciting about Airbnb. So that's something that I don't appreciate. Sometimes these things start up and they have a great freedom, and then they kind of get more and more rigid as the money rolls in, and as the power structure develops or whatever, and they feel more solidified in their own existence maybe, and so it's not a totally pleasant experience to deal with them when we have to deal with them in that sense.
Very well said. Aside from finances, how do you think Airbnb has benefited you guys?
Oh, well, we meet a lot of cool people, and we meet everybody pretty well almost.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more exceptional that we don't sort of briefly meet the people. So that's totally, I think, I would say the largest benefit in a way has been introducing this area to people, and being introduced to people from other areas, and it's been really interesting who we've met and what people are doing, and we do touring too. We're touring musicians, so we have had the fortune of touring different countries and stuff, and when you're doing that, the people who are organizing shows, you get kind of injected right into the culture, right into the scene sort of thing. And there's a bit of a parallel experience here with this, I think. Like when you're staying with local people or whatever, or meeting local people, they both tell us about things that are going on here that we met so-and-so down at the water and he got us lobster. Oh, there's or whatever. Oh, okay. Or we went, that path up there, we were walking, we don't know that path or whatever. So there's a lot of discovery that happens that benefits us, and it has allowed us to to sort of live here and work from here in that sense, which is part of the financials or part of the monetary stuff, but making use of sort of the equity in our house, which perhaps our generation and you guys are different generations. There's a lot of sort of people get a house and that's their equity a lot of times or whatever, and then it's you know, the kind of stability or loyalty of jobs as they were before doesn't exist necessarily in the same way right now. So I think it's an interesting time where all that stuff is kind of being ground up and rethunk and yeah, I think it benefits too. Like there's a little store down here, and we hope that when people come here, they also spend time going down there, and that allows that store, it helps that store to stay open a bit. You know, not it's all sort of, and we send people down to the Wild Caraway, the restaurant down there. So there's kind of like a
I've been surprised at how many people actually want to come here too. We lived here for over 10 years, and it just you feel a little isolated sometimes, and we have the odd friends in Sackville and that, and
but it's quite like there's a lot of tourist stuff to see and do. There's people coming through doing that stuff. But yeah, it is surprising how like last summer we had maybe just a handful of dates where we didn't have people up here, which was not what we anticipated when we first started doing it. Because like Dave's saying, it's kind of like an isolated place kind of.
It is off the beaten path.
Yeah.
Your post definitely does stand out though on the website. Oh, yeah? Something that we noticed is like cool. How it's kind of advertised in the photos. Yeah,
that's really interesting because it's hard for us to gauge. Like it's hard for us to gauge from our perspective what people are seeing. I mean, I can see what they're looking up, and I can pull up and try and search different places too. But in terms of like the pricing or the availability, we don't have too much knowledge of how that looks at the other end or whatever. So
it's something we were pretty like immediately interested in because we were looking at like where to do this and where to conduct the interview.
Right on.
I'm really glad we came here. It's been
right on. We're glad you came here too.
Well, thanks guys for
No
participating
problem.
and
thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, so that was Colleen and Dave. As you can see, they were very pleasant, they're very welcoming hosts, and we're still having a great time here in Port Greville. So really to conclude, the benefits of Airbnb are focused pretty much towards the customer and kind of directly ousting competition.
Yeah, it is pretty like a community feel is definitely the definition of Airbnb at this point. Like they really are just looking out for travelers. It makes it really, really simple to find somewhere to stay when you're traveling, and especially if you have a large group. Like if you go onto the Airbnb website, you can honestly book for 16 plus is one of the options for how many guests you want to have. If you go to a hotel, you say, I need 16 people to stay here tonight. They say, well, we'll give you 4 rooms. Yeah. And then you're going in upwards of $400 and something in one night. But with these kind of opportunities, I mean, you could do that in maybe 200. Like, let's estimate. It's hard to say exactly, but like that is saving so much money for travelers, especially like if you're backpacking through Europe, say, like you're likely not going to have a whole lot of money with you, so you want to be able to economize as much as you can. I think some of the main points that Colleen and Dave were talking about were just how like regular bed and breakfasts kind of have that kind of standard of being more upscale. Exactly. They've mentioned how kids aren't generally wanted in those kind of areas, maybe because it causes disruptions for other guests. But in these kind of situations, like an Airbnb, like the guests are yourselves. Like you aren't going to have other people. Generally, you won't have other people staying with you. So kids are completely welcome. Like anybody of any age is welcome. And they mentioned how well used their house is for stuff like this. Like they mentioned, this is very off the beaten path, but if they're getting about 200 people a year, like that's incredible. So you can only imagine how many people are using Airbnb in other places, right? Like larger cities, or just even like more remote areas where just one person might be using it, but it's a well-traveled place.
Yeah, it actually has a feature. Airbnb has a feature called Instant Book, where most places require a request and then a response from the host, whereas places in very high demand, the host can actually choose to waive the screening process and instantly accept any applicant. So in Glasgow, when I went, it was in very high demand, the flat, and we actually just booked it instantly with no contact to the host, and it ended up being a great experience.
Yeah.
Even though we didn't really contact her before. So it was pretty neat, just the fact that it also gives the host like the option of like you can choose to make you can choose to assure a guest on this night with little notice, but you're gambling with the fact you don't know who they are.
I think with that we can kind of talk about the main points that we want to get across here. I mean, obviously Airbnb is changing the way that hotels and motels are working. Like, it is so simple to use, and it's really changed how traveling works in general. We can talk about the fact, like what you just mentioned, like with the instant book, you're kind of waging between knowing who you're going to have with you, where you have like the option to have a request and you can kind of look into their background, or you can do the instant book like what a hotel would do. Like a hotel never really looks into your background. They don't know who's coming, but it kind of generates more revenue for you as a host, because you can just honestly fill those spots so quickly.
Yeah.
So that's a great feature to have, something like that where it's between comfort and making a little extra money.
Yeah, that's true.
And with the cheap prices, like that is such a big takeaway, because that's going to change Airbnb or traveling for everyone. Even if you're not using Airbnb, you really can get the benefits of it, because hotels are going to have to change their prices. They can't leave them so high. I mean, if you look at the averages for like a hotel versus Airbnb, Airbnb's averages are higher, but that's also like you have to put into account that you can rent hotel or castles,
you can
or
rent,
like a villa, or for months at a time. These are obviously more expensive places.
Wealthy business people will put their houses on Airbnb, so you could have like your bachelor party like for 2 nights in a mansion, and that's going to cost each of your buddies probably $1,000,
right?
But out on average, it would increase the price.
With a hotel, you kind of have the standard. It's about $120 for like your regular hotel, and it gets a little more expensive with the more luxury you want to have, of course. But like with these kind of areas, like you can experience something you never would have ever thought you could experience. Like if you were driving through Ireland and you said, "Wow, those are some beautiful castles," and then you went on Airbnb and you said, "I can live in one of these castles. This is crazy. This sounds amazing for me."
Honey, pack our bags.
Exactly. I'm already there. I'm the king of the castle.
And I think like when like getting down to like the nitty gritty of it, like Airbnb, you know that you're going to get character, and you know that when I booked this spot and looking through the photos, I know that I'm going to get a room that's seen like use, and I'm going to get something with character. We walked in, there was a guitar set up, there's a record player over there, there's a fireplace. It's just really nice that all these things are here, and I know that everyone watching this and everyone listening has the picture of the hotel room in their head. They have the universal hotel room that they stay in, and with Airbnb,
you don't get the same like white sheets with the 2 windows, the TV by the door.
Yeah, I mean, we're sleeping in the same room, and my bed has floral sheets, and their bed has yellow sheets.
Yeah,
it's so unique. Yeah,
exactly.
That's the best way. Windows viewing the sea. We have a bathtub with claw feet. I mean, it's so unique at every visit. I mean, every place you stay in has such a different vibe and feel, whereas hotels kind of are very standardized.
I mean, obviously we don't want to have too much of a bias. We're trying to show both sides of the argument here, but it's hard not to argue for Airbnb at this point. But I think that's where we're going to wrap up this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please feel free to watch some of our other videos, especially our talk on Uber that we had before. Anyways, just leave us a comment in the comment section below, or maybe subscribe if you feel the urge. Thank you so much.